Welcome to another episode of the Co-op Connection podcast. Today we are joined by Perry from WaterTight Roofing. Perry helps educate our members on the misconceptions about commercial roofing, how to budget and plan for the next roofing project, and so much more. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Perry, glad you could make it in here with us.
Happy to be here.
Appreciate you coming. And so with all of our podcasts, I like when we start out with something a little more personable and just kind of get to know you a little bit. And if you could tell us a little bit about how you started with commercial roofing and where you got to where you are now.
So I started about 11 years ago, a little north of 11 years ago. Was actually brought in by my brother-in-law, a fellow named Dan, great guy. Originally worked for his company, which will go unnamed because they're no longer in business. Great guy, still doing this line of work with a different company. I was with his firm for about a year and a half, and just wasn't getting the support that I thought was necessary for the work that we were doing. These are big roofs that are supposed to last a long time. And at that point, I got introduced to the fellows who own WaterTight Roofing, and I switched over to them based on, honestly, part of their motivation for starting the company was they also had worked for another roofing company that will also go unnamed. And they decided to branch out because they weren't getting the support that they needed. They were having issues with, leaks are going to pop up every once in a while. Nothing ever goes perfectly. It's easy to be really good at your job when things go according to plan, but the really good companies show their merits when things don't go according to plan. And so I switched over to WaterTight because Cole and Mike, the guys who own the spot, had started it because they wanted to actually work for or own a company that supported the roofs that they built.
Okay, that's good. Now, I know that I'm sure you've heard a lot of misconceptions when it comes to commercial roofing. Something I think about is I might hear people say that there's no difference between a residential roof and a commercial roof. So can you speak to a little bit of that, maybe that one in particular, or some other misconceptions that people might have about commercial roofing?
So if we're talking shingles on a pitched roof, right, the same idea applies, whether it be a 2,500 square foot house or a 25,000 square foot church. The difference even on that scale is that with a house, you get it done in a day. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen next week. You don't have to worry about what the weather's going to do tomorrow morning. You don't have to worry about 50 or 60 or 100 cars coming in on a Wednesday night for service. So really, when it comes to something as simple as a shingle roof, scale does matter. Catching a bass is one thing. Catching a marlin is another. Catching 7 marlin is an entirely another thing. Commercial roofing is at least the marlin, if not multiple marlin. And you have to have different tools and different approach to pull that off. And again, that's just shingle. If you get into metal roofing, you really want a crew that knows what they're doing. You do not want a shingle crew installing a metal roof. You don't want a metal crew installing a shingle roof. Once you get into coatings and or flat roofing, the variables become, coatings are somewhat easier, really depending on the condition of the roof that you're trying to coat. But once you get into flat roofing specifically, there's so many ways to skin that cat. And with flat roofing and metal roofing and coatings, you have to have specialists who know how to diagnose your issue, propose a cost-effective, long-term solution, and have the crews and scalability to address that issue in a way it's going to last 10, 20 years. The other thing with commercial, houses, people are in them for 10, 15, 20 years. Church is going to be there for 50 or 70.
Right.
So you want to do it in a way that it lasts a long time, but also is able to be redone again if possible without having to completely start over from scratch.
Yeah.
So to me, those are the main differences. The options on commercial roofing are contain multitudes, but also scalability and being able to handle a large project without any major headaches.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there about, wanting a roof that lasts. And I think about how oftentimes, obviously churches, they have a budget and they want to do something that's going to kind of put the Band-Aid on it. But, in your residential, in the home, if there's a leak or something like that, it's going to inconvenience you and maybe your wife and kids or whatever. If you're having that in a church, it's inconveniencing a whole congregation.
Above the front pew.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's
above the pastor's head.
Right.
That's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So now, what factors would you say most influence the cost of commercial roofing?
So again, shingle's pretty straightforward. When it comes to metal roofing, it has to do with what grade do you want? What gauge do you want? Do you want it to be a standard steel color? Do you want it to be a specific, a red, a green, a blue, whatever? Sometimes churches want that blue. What? Yeah, certainly. There's a color called Hawaiian blue. We did it over in Katy maybe a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes they want copper. You want a copper metal roof, you better do a bunch of bake sales.
Right.
It's going to be a bit. It's going to be a bit. So that has to do with commercial metal. Again, when you get into coatings are a little bit easier, except for like a base level coating is going to have a 10-year warranty. You can do a 15-year warranty or a 20-year warranty. The question is, what do you want and how much budget do you have and how close can you get those two things together? And then flat roofing, again, there are so many options. The go-to solution for flat roofing nowadays is called single membrane. For most churches, it'd be TPO, which is like a rubberized plastic. If you're dealing with a place that has like grease traps or whatnot, you'd go with a thing called PVC. PVC is more plastic than it is rubber, which means it's going to deal with organics better. But essentially, a single membrane roof is a rubberized flat tarp that heat welds to itself. And there's one way to put that on that makes sense. You can glue it down, you can screw it down. The question is, what do you put underneath it? Do you put a ½ inch of something that just keeps it in place, or do you add 3 inches of insulation because you also want to add R value?
Right.
Or are you dealing with a flat roof that has drainage problems? Because then maybe you add insulation in certain ways to taper it, to create crickets, to push water away from areas where it's ponding, right? You built the church 30 years ago, and there's just one area that's just, Texas is going to settle.
Right.
It's going to settle. Now, this one part of the church, just, you can't get the water off of it. Well, we put insulation in a way that pushes the water to drains, to gutters, to where it's supposed to be, as opposed to just this duck pond, above the first pew of the church. So that's really the variables when it comes to commercial roofing.
Yeah, and kind of just on the same topic is cost. So, for example, I had a church the other day. They had 3 bids for their roof. One was like $250,000, one was $175,000, and one was like $75,000 or something like that. So if you're the member, like, what kind of questions should they be asking with why there's such a variation there?
So bids are interesting. As I see it, bids have 3 circles. There's what do you want, there's what do you need, and there's what can you afford. And the whole idea of a bid is to try and get those 3 circles as much as possible to overlap each other. You want X, you need Y, you can afford Q, right? So how do you get those things to come together? The real question when it comes to that sort of thing, it's hard to assess that, not having seen the bids, not knowing the situation.
Right.
It's possible that one vendor is just more expensive. Maybe their crews are better. Also, maybe they just get more overhead. I don't know. Maybe the boss needs a new deep sea fishing boat. I have no idea. But the one thing I would look at, again, shingle's pretty straightforward. If you've got a good crew and you're ordering good materials, a name brand, not a generic shingle, should be apples to apples.
Right.
Metal, entirely dependent upon the crew you have. And again, where you're getting the materials from. If you got a really low bid, there's a chance he's just picking up whatever's available at the local hardware store and putting it up there and crossing his fingers, right? So are all the materials coming from one distinct supplier, so that if in 17 years you've got a weird surface rust issue that doesn't make any sense, well, we got it all from vendor X.
Right.
We didn't get a third of it from vendor X and a third of it from vendor Y and a third of it from vendor Z. Then when it comes to flat roofing, again, the expense there comes into what are you trying to accomplish? And honestly, did you get to the roof before it became a real problem? Flat roofing gets really expensive once it really starts taking in water. If the flat roof is essentially a waterbed full of sawdust, you probably got to take that whole thing off and start all over again. And that's where multiplicity of expense starts to pop up.
So with the expense, obviously roofs, that's a cost. So what kind of advice would you give to a ministry when it comes to budgeting or planning for roofing expenses?
Okay. First thing I would say on this, most churches have some sort of a maintenance or facilities director or staff or whatever the case may be. Please make sure they're using, if it's a shingle, it's something that's appropriate for shingles. If it's metal, it's something that's appropriate for metal. Please don't put a silicone caulk on a shingle. Please don't get up there with a bucket of tar on metal, because all you're doing is masking whatever issues are happening. And then when someone who shows up who is thinking about what should go there looks at it, they can't see anything. You slather the metal roof in tar, and now all the problems are completely disguised by the melting tar in the Houston sun. But as far as planning, the first thing I would say, every church should be aware of its insurance deductible. Because in Texas, weather's coming eventually.
Yeah.
Is it
Especially
hail?
down south, yeah.
Right. Is it hail in Mineral Wells? Is it a hurricane in Port Aransas? Is it wind in Abilene?
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's coming. And it's coming at the weirdest time from the weirdest direction, right when you're not looking. So know your deductible and probably have that laid back in reserve. On the other side of that, if you do get to the point where roofs need to be addressed and the weather hasn't come yet, have an idea of how long a roof is supposed to last, and a good 2 or 3 years before the end of life, start looking at what needs to be done to rejuvenate it.
Okay.
Is what I would say. And then you can have a plan. So metal roofs, every 8 to 10 years, you'd have someone get up there and just look at the fasteners and make sure they're okay. As the fasteners start to fail, you have to start weighing the option of, do I want to replace this roof, which will last me another 10 or 15 years, or do I want to coat it, which can also last 10 or 15 years for half the price?
Right.
When it comes to flat roofing, the thing I would say about flat roofing is they last about 20 years. 17 or 18 years in, I would start really considering what you want to do with it. Do you want to, again, coat it before it becomes a problem, or do you want to wait an extra 10 years? You've got a dozen leaks, and now you've got to do something much more invasive to fix it. So I would say stay ahead of. If the roof is supposed to last 20, 25 years, start looking at it at 17, 18 years. If it's supposed to last 25, 30 years, start looking at it at 22, 23 years. If you're dealing with a roof and you've got a leak last week and 3 leaks this week, those aren't your last leaks.
Yeah.
That's the beginning.
Right.
They are like guppies. 1 becomes 3, becomes 9, becomes why is it leaking everywhere?
Yeah.
So again, if you've got facilities guys who can properly address these things, that's great. But once you start getting into handfuls of leaks, your roof is telling you something. Listen to it.
That's good. Good advice. Got one last question.
Okay.
Um,
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
one thing that I think churches need to be aware of, when the weather does come, the thing I see more often than not, churches think of insurance claims as though it were a bid, and it is not. A bid, like I said, is what do you want, what do you need, and what can you afford, right? And how do you get those things to line up? Insurance is what did the hail or wind take or damage or ruin? Who do you have that can help you figure out everything that was damaged and can fix all of it? Because insurance, you pay your deductible and insurance owes for the rest. So the functional part of an insurance claim, in my opinion, is that adjustment period where on the front end, you have someone that you trust can do the work, but they can also make sure that nothing gets missed. They can also make sure that apples get called apples and oranges get called oranges. The number of times that I've seen in insurance claims where we show up after the fact and they're trying to get a roof done for 5X, and you look at it and it's worth 8X. And you look at the line items and you realize the adjuster meant well, but he paid for a chicken barn roof, not for a commercial grade roof. Or paid for a commercial grade roof, not for that copper panel you have up there. Again, treating an insurance claim as though it were a bid almost guarantees that you get less than you're supposed to get out of the claim. Because again, a bid is what do you want, what can you afford?
Yeah.
Insurance is what's damaged.
Right.
And what does the policy allow for? There's often times where we get up there and the church isn't up to code because it was built 20 years ago. Well, oftentimes policies have code upgrade in there. And the adjuster doesn't realize it or the roofer doesn't point it out. So we get up there and find it and go, hey, by the way, this was built in 97 when it only required this flat roof to have an inch of insulation.
Right.
Well, now this flat roof, because Houston says so, requires 3.5 inches of insulation.
That's more.
And the church doesn't get that 3.5 because you don't have someone who's qualified to assess that and get it paid for appropriately.
Gotcha.
And so not only do you get less on the front end there, but think about the energy savings for church X when the insulation goes from 1 inch to 3.5 inches over the next 20 years in Houston when it's 98 degrees and 92% humidity. So that's the one last thing I wanted to.
Okay.
Sorry. I find it all the time. We get asked for bids coming out of insurance claims, and it's like, no, we have to assess damage. Insurance uses a very specific estimating program, which is updated monthly to fair market values. It's called Xactimate. If you're asking for a bid, you're essentially asking how much money you can save the insurance company, which isn't why I have insurance. I have insurance to get back to at least as good as when the storm hit me.
Not better.
9 times out of 10, it's better than we leave people better than when the storm found them.
Right.
Every time, if we're allowed to do the job that we're brought in to do, which is assess damage, estimate, repair. One thing I see that's happening here in Texas specifically is the insurance part's getting more challenging. So for a church to be on top of what their policy says they're owed for once the hurricane or the hailstorm or whatever comes through, that's the real shifting piece right now. Because knowing your deductible is important, keeping on top of it, obviously, but also making sure that when you get your new policy, the insurance company hasn't made changes you haven't agreed to. Because it does happen from time to time where we find out, after the storm comes, oh, wait a second, I don't remember seeing that sort of thing. The real challenge in commercial roofing in Texas in the last 5 years, and I think in the next 5 to 10 years, is changes in insurance and how they're writing their coverages. I think materials, installations really have reached a point where, I don't know, I guess until robots start doing it for us, I don't think it's making that big of a difference. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot of that I just don't agree with, I see a lot of people doing either sight unseen roof inspections or roof bids, where you reach out to company X and they just send you a bid.
Right.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
how did they do that? Or they do it from a drone. Drones are fine, I think. But unless it's a really straightforward roof, you're probably missing something.
Yeah.
And that something you missed, you're going to try and turn into a change order mid-project. So I guess I'm still old school. I feel like people are trying to shoehorn technology in where sometimes I don't think it fits. I think in my line of work, if I'm not walking the roof during the adjuster process or during the estimation process, I'm doing something wrong. Truly. We had one in Katy, again, year and a half, actually the one that was blue, a year and a half ago, was asked for a coating bid. And 2 other companies had bid to coat that roof. Well, I get up there, and the second step I took, the roof popped open and scale rust came right out of the seam. So this thing was rusting from the inside out. And I had to present to, first of all, I had to get off the roof without dying because the roof is rusting from the inside. But I had to present to our customer now, hey, you can't coat this roof. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, here, look at all these pictures. You take a step and it tears open from the inside and like popcorn comes out, little scale popcorn, scale rust popcorn comes out. And so again, to me, that is a case of our competitors proposed something that was going to absolutely fail within a year because they didn't actually get on the roof.
Yeah.
I don't know if they did it from satellite view, never having shown up, or a drone from the parking lot, but without getting boots on the roof, they proposed something that was going to be a real mess in the long term.
And Perry, with all that you're mentioning there, you wanting to be the boots on the roof, you think that's the best way to go. What advantages our co-op members have for something like that for you? Is there like a free inspection that you do, or
Absolutely. Any co-op member reaches out to us and says they want the roof looked at, I'm going to give them a call, figure out specifically if there's something they're concerned about. There usually is. Yeah. Right? But if not, if they just want some professional eyes to take a look at the roof and let them know, hey, you doing good, or rut-row.
Right.
I'm happy to come by and give them an honest opinion.
All right.
We do it all the time. Yeah. Where the other trick sometimes is you get up there and they don't realize that when they were sleeping one night, they got hit by a big storm, right? The gutters were still fine and the trees look fine the next day, but you get up there and it's like, wait a second, this looks like someone walked around with a ball peen hammer. Yeah. What happened here, right? So free inspections, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Free inspections. I'm always going to engage and figure out what their concerns are before I get up there. But let's take a look and make sure things are good, or if things are a little bit less than good, let's talk about what could be done and what the timeline might be.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, Perry. It was helpful to me. I hope others got a lot out of it, and we appreciate you and all that WaterTight does for co-op members.
We are pleased as punch to be a part of the co-op, and literally not a day go by that I'm not very, very thankful I met, well, he's behind the camera, that I met Topher at the, which show was that?
CFA? No.
What did we meet at? The Church Network?
It was in Dallas, wasn't it? Church Network.
Yeah.
Church Network show 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So anyways, we couldn't be happier. And I hope all you guys ever get from us is rave reviews.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Co-op Connection podcast. For more information about Perry and WaterTight Roofing, please visit our website, www.churchcoop.org.